Hello, everyone. I'm Jamin Grigg. I'm the Southwest Region Senior Wildlife Biologist for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about mule deer management in the Gunnison Basin. There's three mule deer herds existing within the Gunnison Basin, and we're in the process of updating and revising those herd management plans for those populations. The last herd management plans were revised in 2013, and population objectives, buck ratio objectives were set at that point in time. Our herd management plans are generally in place for 10 years, and then we'll generally try to revise them on a 10-year time period. So we're in the process of gathering stakeholder input, public input at this time, and that's the purpose of this presentation is just to give an overview of mule deer management in the Gunnison Basin currently, provide some population level info, and then talk about where we're headed in the future with population objectives and buck ratio objectives and management of deer in the Gunnison Basin. There are currently three deer herds existing in the Gunnison Basin. The first one is D-21, which encompasses Game Management Unit 54. This is the West Elks population existing north and west of Gunnison, north towards Crested Butte, west towards Blue Mesa Reservoir, and north of Blue Mesa Reservoir. So again, encompassing Game Management Unit 54. As you likely all know, the Gunnison Basin experienced a difficult winter, the winter of 2007-2008. We saw some population declines during that winter and following that winter. This population at that point in time dropped below the current population objective, again, that was set in 2013 of 5,000 to 5,500 animals. You can see that there with the red dashed line on the graph. That's the current population objective, again, of 5,000 to 5,500 animals for this population. So following that harsh winter of 2007-2008, this population was below that objective and remained mostly below that population objective until around 2019. We started to see increased fawn recruitment at that point in time, increased fawn survival, and this population has since rebounded up into the current population objective and is currently sitting kind of along the top end of that population objective of around 5,500 animals. We collect buck ratios from the helicopter in December every year. So these are a post-hunt classification following the end of the hunting seasons, again, generally occurring in December every year and classified from the helicopter. And this is how we collect age and sex ratios, fawn and buck ratios throughout the population. The current buck ratio for the D21 population is 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does. Again, you can see that there in the red dashed lines. And this population in recent years, buck ratios have tended to fluctuate right along the top end of that or slightly over that, generally fluctuating between about 35 to 50 bucks per 100 does, again, post-hunt. You can see that the model estimated buck ratios track our observed buck ratios pretty nicely, which is a good indication that the population model is running smoothly and that our population estimates and buck ratio estimates are likely reasonable. This population has experienced high fawn recruitment and high fawn survival in recent years. This has led to population increases and in some instances a need to harvest more does, and we've allocated antlerless licenses as needed to keep the population within the objective. But fawn ratios in this population tend to do well during good moisture years, years when the habitat conditions are in good shape, and the herd is healthy, and we tend to see very high fawn ratios during those years, anywhere from in the 60s all the way up to to around 90 fawns per 100 does. And again, these are December ratios. Harvest in the Gunnison Basin deer herds declined significantly following the winter of 07-08. CPW had to reduce licenses based on the impacts from that winter, and we did so. And since that time, we've had a couple other harsh winters here and there, nothing as substantial as 2007, 2008. But we've never reached the harvest levels that we had in this population prior to that harsh winter. Although in recent years, as this population has rebounded and increased to the upper end of the population objective, we have been able to begin increasing buck licenses and have seen a corresponding increase in buck harvest here in the last few years. Following the hunting seasons every year, we provide a hunter survey, an optional hunter survey that hunters can respond to following their hunt, and they can give us their opinion of their hunt and satisfaction of their hunting experience. So these are results from license holders in D21 this past year. So it would have been post-hunt 2022. So license holders from the 2022 hunting season. And you can see of about 600 or a little over 600 license holders in the DAU, we received post-hunt survey responses from 209 hunters. So pretty good sample size. This is a question, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the total number of deer you saw during the 2022 deer hunting season? And you can see that generally, for the most part, there's high levels of satisfaction within this DAU, shown in the green bars there, where a large majority of the hunters are satisfied with their hunt. This similar question, even if you were only hunting doe deer, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the total number of bucks you saw while hunting during the 2022 deer season? Again, this is from about 200, a little over 200 out of 600 license holders. And again, pretty high levels of satisfaction related to the total number of bucks that we're seeing. This question, which statement comes closer to your own opinion? A, which is shown there in the orange. I want to be able to hunt deer as often as possible, even if it means fewer mature bucks on the landscape. And then B, shown in blue, I want to be able to hunt mature bucks, even if it means I am able to hunt less often. And you can see by about a 3-to-1 margin, folks would prefer to have more mature males on the landscape, even if that means hunting less frequently. And we'll go through these questions for all three of the deer populations in the Gunnison Basin, but as you'll see, they're all relatively similar. This question, over the next 10 years, do you think that the deer population in D21 should A, decrease moderately, B, decrease slightly, C, stay the same, D, increase slightly, or E, increase moderately? And you can see that about 30% of hunters feel like the population is good where it's at, would like to see stability, maintain the current population range, and then about another 60% or so would like to see a slight to moderate increase in the population. To what extent did you feel crowded by other hunters while deer hunting in D21, Game Management Unit 54? A is not at all crowded, B is slightly crowded, C is moderately crowded, D is very crowded. And as you can see there, there is some concern about hunter crowding in this population. This is also an over-the-counter unit for for elk hunters during the rifle seasons. So during the second and third rifle seasons, there would be over-the-counter elk hunters in this unit. That probably leads to some level of crowding as well, or a feeling of crowding. So you can see there is some concern about crowding from other hunters within this population. Overall, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with your deer hunting experience in D21? A is very satisfied, B is somewhat satisfied. Excuse me, A is very dissatisfied, B is somewhat dissatisfied, C is neither dissatisfied or satisfied, D is somewhat satisfied, and E is very satisfied. So as you can see, the majority of hunters in D21 are somewhat to very satisfied with their deer hunt last year. So with that, we'll conclude D21, and we'll move on to D22. D22 encompasses game management units 55 and 551. This would be east of Gunnison towards the Continental Divide. This is known as the Taylor Park deer herd. Similar to D21, this population experienced a decrease and a bit of a winter die-off during the winter of 07-08. It has since rebounded a couple different times. It experienced another bit of a die-off during the winter of 16-17 and has since rebounded. This population, similar to the last one, has a population objective of 5,000 to 5,500 deer, and is currently slightly above that population objective, sitting up closer to about 6,500 deer, shown there with the 2022 post-hunt population estimate with the red dot there, the orange dot. Buck ratios in this population, similar to D21, decreased following the winter of 07-08 and have since rebounded and generally fluctuate along the top end of the current post-hunt buck ratio objective of 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does. Again, these objectives were all set in 2013, so have been in place for the last 10 years or so. But currently, both the modeled or predicted as well as the observed buck ratios are slightly above the current buck ratio objective, sitting up around 45 to 50 bucks per 100 does post-hunt. This population also has experienced high fawn recruitment in recent years. Anything over about 60 fawns per 100 does post-hunt is a very high, very good fawn ratio. So we've observed good population growth in this population, and population's currently doing very well with high fawn ratios, high fawn recruitment. Similar to D21, harvest in this population declined following license reductions after the winter of 07-08. License numbers were reduced significantly, and then following the winter of 16-17 as well, and then with the high fawn recruitment, high fawn survival that we've observed in recent years, this population has steadily increased, and we've simultaneously increased both buck harvest and doe harvest, antlerless harvest in this population during that time period. So again, the opt-in hunter surveys taking place post-hunt this last year, post-hunt 2022. As you can see, there were about 1,200 or so licenses sold to deer hunters in D22 this last year. Of those 1,200 or so license holders, about 435 of them responded to this survey. So we'll go through these survey results again real quickly. The first one, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the total number of deer you saw in D22 during the 2022 deer hunting season? A is very dissatisfied, B is somewhat dissatisfied, C is neither dissatisfied or satisfied, D is somewhat satisfied, and E is very satisfied. And as you can see, there's a high level of satisfaction amongst hunters who hunted D22 this past year in 2022. This question, even if you were only hunting doe deer, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the total number of bucks you saw while hunting during the 2022 deer season? Again, this is a response of 435 license holders from this last year. And again, you can see high levels of satisfaction with the total number of bucks seen. Which statement comes closer to your own opinion? A, shown in orange, I want to be able to hunt deer in D22 as often as possible, even if it means fewer mature bucks. Or B, shown in blue, I want to be able to hunt mature bucks in D22, even if it means I'm able to hunt less often. And again, by this time it's about a 2-to-1 margin. Hunters would generally like to have more mature animals in the population, even if that means hunting less frequently. Over the next 10 years, do you think that the deer population in D22 should A, decrease moderately, B, decrease slightly, C, stay the same, D, increase slightly, or E, increase moderately? And again, about 38% of deer hunters are satisfied with where the population is at, thinks it's at a good level, and would like to see it maintained where it currently is. And then you can see a large percentage of hunters would like to see a slight to moderate increase in the population as well. To what extent did you feel crowded by other hunters while deer hunting in D22? A is not at all, B slightly, C moderately, D very crowded. Not as much hunter crowding in this DAU, which is interesting because there's also over-the-counter elk hunters during second and third season in this DAU, so that's an interesting result. But overall, hunters don't feel as crowded in this DAU hunting this deer population. Overall, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with your deer hunting experience in D22? A, very satisfied, B, somewhat dissatisfied. Excuse me, A is very dissatisfied, B is somewhat dissatisfied, C is neither dissatisfied or satisfied, D is somewhat satisfied, E, very satisfied. And you can see overall hunters are generally pretty satisfied with their deer hunting experience in D22. And the third population existing within the Gunnison Basin is D25. This is the powderhorn deer herd. Encompasses GMU's Game Management Units 66 and 67 south from Gunnison towards Lake City. This population, like the others, experienced population decline following the winter of 2007-2008, then rebounded. Another little bit of a population decline following or during the winter of 16-17, then another population rebound, and currently this population is sitting on the upper end of the population objective. This population objective is actually 5,400 to 5,900 deer, again set in 2013, and this population is currently sitting slightly above that, closer to about 6,500 deer, somewhere in that range. Observed and model predicted post-hunt buck-doe ratios, again, they track very well, good indication that the model is running smoothly and performing well. This population, like the others, has a post-hunt buck-doe ratio of 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does, set in 2013, and current buck ratios are on the upper end of that level, slightly above that populate or the buck ratio objective. Currently sitting up around 45 bucks per 100 does post hunt. Like the other Gunnison Basin deer populations, this population has experienced very high fawn recruitment in recent years. Fawn survival, population is doing very well. We've seen a population increase based on this fawn survival. Fawn ratio is up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, even as high as 90. So very high fawn survival and fawn recruitment in this population in recent years. Harvest, again, decline in this population following the winter of 07-08, where we reduced license numbers. We had to reduce license numbers again following the winter of 2016-2017, and then license numbers have the population has increased since that time period based on those high fawn ratios. And we've been able to increase both buck and doe license numbers in this population since that time period. Again, the opt-in hunter surveys, we had about 1,000 license holders in this population, or in this DAU last year, 2022, and received about 412 responses from hunters following their hunts. So again, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the total number of deer you saw during the 2022 deer hunting season? You can see the majority of hunters were very satisfied or largely satisfied with the number of deer that they saw while hunting. Even if you were only hunting doe deer, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with the total number of bucks you saw while hunting during the 2022 deer season? Again, you can see some dissatisfaction there in terms of number of bucks seen certainly from some hunters, but overall pretty large levels of satisfaction with the number of bucks that were seen during their hunt. Which statement comes closer to your own opinion? Again, I want to be able to hunt deer as often as possible, even if it means fewer mature bucks, shown there in the orange. B, shown in the blue, is I want to be able to hunt mature bucks in D25, even if it means I'm able to hunt less often. And you can see by about a 3-to-1 margin there, hunters would generally like to see more mature bucks in the population and on the landscape, even if that means hunting less frequently. Over the next 10 years, do you think the deer population in D25 should decrease moderately, decrease slightly, stay the same, increase slightly, or increase moderately? You can see the majority of hunters actually think the deer population is good where it's at. 43% say stay the same, maintain the current population range, and then you can also see a segment of the hunting population that would like to see more deer on the landscape. To what extent did you feel crowded by other hunters while deer hunting in D25? Again, this is game management units 66 and 67. And you can see generally there's not a lot of concern about crowding in this DAU. This is also a limited elk DAU, so that certainly factors in. Not as many elk hunters on the landscape, and not as much crowding as a result. Overall, how dissatisfied or satisfied were you with your deer hunting experience in D25? And again, you see high levels of satisfaction generally in this DAU. I just threw this in here to show some of the survival monitoring that we've done since the winter of 07-08. So since we experienced that population decline in 07-08, we've been intensively monitoring deer survival in the Gunnison Basin. These collars are spread across all three of those deer DAUs, and annually we're maintaining a sample of at least 60 fawn collars and at least 80 doe collars across the landscape. We monitor annual doe survival, and then that fawn survival estimate is an overwinter fawn survival estimate. So we're monitoring fawn survival from December 15th to June 15th annually, and then does would be year-round, so December 15th to the following December 15th. You can see the survival rates, the overwinter fawn and annual doe survival rates each year that we've been monitoring that in the Gunnison Basin. As you can see, fawn survival in particular tends to fluctuate greatly. Most of that's based on winter conditions. During harsh winters, we see very low fawn survival, while doe survival tends to be a little more stable. Some key issues for consideration for deer management in the Gunnison Basin. Obviously, this deer population, ungulate populations in the Gunnison Basin are driven largely by winter range carrying capacity. We can only support so many animals on the landscape during harsh winters, and that's a real driver of population performance and population size in the Gunnison Basin. Certainly, all of this overlaps with Gunnison sage grouse range. Gunnison sage grouse are a state and federally listed species, and so there are certainly considerations there. Hunter preferences for what they would like to see on the landscape as far as buck ratios, population size, buck ratios, and then hunter crowding issues as well. All of that plays into this. Chronic wasting disease is always an issue with deer management. Certainly in western Colorado, that is the case. We don't currently, we haven't yet detected chronic wasting disease in the Gunnison Basin, but we do have chronic wasting disease, known chronic wasting disease to the north, west, and south of the Gunnison Basin, so not very far away, and so that is always a factor for deer management. General land use and overall habitat quality and habitat conservation across the basin. We've seen an increase in recreation pressure in recent years, especially on public lands. That's certainly a factor. Noxious weed invasion, cheatgrass, thistles, other noxious weeds across the landscape. Human development, certainly. Migration connectivity, so maintaining migration corridors, maintaining connectivity across the landscape so that animals can move across the landscape the way that they would have historically, and then highway traffic. We've seen an increase in highway traffic along Highway 50 and other travel routes in recent years, and that has an impact as well. So all of these factor into mule deer conservation and mule deer management in the Gunnison Basin. Another topic that has been discussed and considered for a long time now, number of years, but something that seems to be gaining steam is, especially since we've been deploying radio collars and monitoring deer movement throughout the basin and watching how these populations interact with each other. One thing that has been thrown out is the possibility of combining these three DAUs into one large DAU. Biologically, this deer population functions as one deer population. We see a lot of interchange across the Gunnison Basin with deer populations, and so biologically it just probably makes a lot of sense for this to be one large deer population. We could still manage deer separately based on the game management units, so we could have separate population management strategies across the different game management units. But as far as population modeling, population estimation, and managing the population as a whole, this population really functions as the Gunnison Basin functions as one mule deer population, and probably makes sense to combine them into one deer DAU. So that is certainly something that is being discussed and considered, and something that we would like feedback on. If we were to do that, this is what the population estimate would look like. So if we combine D21, D22, D25 into one large mule deer population, and put that into one model, the current population estimate is sitting up around 19,000 deer. Actually, it's about 18,900 deer, so just below 19,000 deer. And then if we were to combine those population objectives of those three herds, that gives us a population of objective of about 15,400 to 16,900 animals, shown in the gray box there. CPW has had some discussions about potentially setting a new population objective. If we were to combine these deer populations into one herd, setting a population objective, or proposing a population objective of around 17,000 to 20,000 animals. That would encompass the current population estimate, so current population numbers in the Gunnison Basin, and would be slightly higher or just sitting on the high end with potential for some increase compared to the deer population objectives from the last 10 years. So something to consider there. The buck ratio, post-hunt buck ratio for all three of these populations is the same and has been historically at 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does since 2013. Prior to that, the buck ratio, post-hunt buck ratio, was 40 to 45 bucks per 100 does. CPW at this time isn't recommending any change in the buck ratio objective. Would like to maintain that post-hunt buck ratio objective of 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does. And you can see currently these populations, if they're combined, we're currently sitting on the upper end or slightly above that current buck ratio objective. So with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation. I know that's a lot of information, but please reach out to myself or local CPW staff there in Gunnison. If you have questions, we'd be happy to talk to you. You can email comments to me at jamin.grigg@state.co.us. So jamin.grigg@state.co.us. Or again, you can also reach out to local staff there in the Gunnison office. So with that, really appreciate your time, appreciate your interest in deer management in the Gunnison Basin, and we look forward to future conversations and your input in this deer management plan. Thank you very much.